Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue bringing you a new video about the story of Hoai Ca and Hùng. A peaceful morning on the old land brought Hoai Ca a feeling that was both familiar and strangely new. As the early sunlight still lingered softly on dew-damp patches of grass, she stood quietly for a long while in her small garden, silently observing each row of soil, each cluster of green leaves gently swaying in the morning breeze. The feeling was neither loud nor overwhelming. It slipped quietly into her heart, like an old memory awakened after a long sleep. This land had once witnessed countless upheavals, harsh floods, layers of ash, and the ruins of the old house. Yet now, it appeared before Hoai Ca in an entirely different form, gentle and full of life. She couldn't help feeling surprised when she realized that the vegetable garden she had planted, with barely any care, had grown so lush. The seeds she had hurriedly buried in the soil during days filled with worry had taken root and risen strong, as if untouched by the harsh months they had endured. The ash from the old house had long been cleared away, mixing with fertile silt after the Great Flood, leaving the soil unusually loose and rich. The earth was no longer hard and barren. It had softened and warmed, as if it, too, were reviving alongside the people who lived on it. Rows of leafy greens stretched out vibrantly, tender green leaves crowding together with vitality. White radishes peeked above the soil, kohlrabi stood plump and round, and cabbages wrapped their leaves tightly, as if quietly competing to see which would grow faster. The sight made Hoai Ca smile, a gentle, relieved smile after so many exhausting days. She felt as though the garden was making up for all she had endured, like a silent yet sincere gift. No words, no promises. The land simply gave, quietly, enough to soothe a weary heart. Looking at the garden before her, Hoai Ca began calculating in her mind. If she brought all these vegetables to the market, it might earn enough to help cover daily expenses for her and Tony. Not much, but enough to ease the worry of each meal, each day. If prices were good, she might even save a little for the days leading up to Tet. The thought warmed her heart, because for her, Tet was not just a date on the calendar. It was a concern, a hope to give Tony a less difficult holiday than in previous years. She reminded herself to bring a carrying pole next time, so she could harvest more. Not only for convenience, but to gather the vegetables when they were at their freshest and best. Each bundle of greens, each radish, was the result of nature and patience, and she did not want to waste any of it. In her mind, small plans began to take clearer shape, naturally linking together, as if life, after so many storms, was slowly returning to its familiar rhythm. In another corner of the garden, sugarcane stalks grew tall and sturdy, their long leaves rustling in the wind. At first, Hoai Ca had planned to leave the cane until closer to Tet, hoping the price would rise, so she could earn a bit more. But thinking about passers-by breaking them off, or other unpredictable risks, made her uneasy. In the end, she decided to cut them early and boil them down into syrup. The decision came not only from practical concerns, but from something deeper and more personal. For Hoai Ca, sugarcane syrup at Tet was not just something to use or sell. It carried the scent of togetherness, of evenings gathered around the fire, where the family made cakes together, talked, and shared stories. In the thin veil of smoke, laughter mingled with the crackling of firewood, warmth spreading to chase away the year-end cold. Those memories, though distant, still lived quietly in her mind, becoming an inseparable part of the simple yet meaningful Tet she cherished. Thinking of this, Hoai Ca felt her heart grow still, not with sadness, but with a deep, quiet emotion. She knew the road ahead would still hold many hardships, but at least, on this peaceful morning, Standing amid the lush garden and the revived land, she had the right to hope. To hope that from small things, from the vegetable patch, from a pot of sugarcane syrup, from diligence and patience, a steadier future would slowly take shape, continuing the journey that she and Tony still had ahead of them. While Hoai Ca was away busy with work, someone quietly came by. Under the gentle midday sun, the small garden appeared very different from the last visit. What had once been borrowed ground was now covered in green, neat rows of vegetables, tender young leaves brimming with life. A single glance was enough to see how much quiet effort Hoai Ca had poured into this place. No show, no noise, just steady patience day after day. The garden was not only a place to grow vegetables, it seemed to be where she placed her hopes, a spiritual anchor amid difficult months. The visitor stood there for a long while, eyes tracing each bed of greens stretching toward the sunlight. The soil beneath their feet was slightly dry, fine cracks showing after several days of heat. Without a word, they rolled up their sleeves, drew water from the barrel, and slowly watered the entire garden. Each bucketful soaked into the earth, easing its dryness. The gesture felt natural, like a long-formed habit of care. No reason needed, no audience required. Simply seeing a need and acting on it, the way people quietly look after one another in the smallest of ways. When Hoai Ca returned, the sun had softened. She paused for a moment upon noticing someone in the garden, the vegetable beds looking noticeably fresher. The meeting was unplanned, without formal greetings, just a meeting of eyes, a faint smile, and a familiar feeling that spread quickly. The atmosphere between them was simple yet warm, as if they were accustomed to meeting in such everyday moments. They sat by the porch, and the conversation began with small things: the thriving garden, the flowers along the path, the soil and the weather, before slowly moving to deeper matters. The questions did not stop at the surface. They gently reached the quiet spaces within each heart. No one rushed, no one pressed. The conversation flowed naturally, sincerely. As the woman spoke of the hardships she had just endured, her voice could not hide its emotion. There were days when debts piled up one after another, seemingly impossible to repay. Nights of worry that stole her sleep, the feeling of being driven into a corner with nowhere to cling to. At times, she believed every door had closed before her. Misfortunes came one after another, from being assaulted by malicious people to crushing mental pressure, leaving her close to collapse. She recounted it all in a lowered voice, each detail still etched in memory. Fears hard to put into words, days lived in constant unease. Yet during that time, Hoai Ca's encouragement and help became a vital support. Not grand promises, but attentive listening. Simple words spoken at the right moment, enough to keep her from feeling alone. Alongside that was Hung's relentless effort, running everywhere, finding ways to untangle each knot, slowly but surely. One by one, things were resolved, burdens gradually set down. Not everything became smooth at once, but at least the road ahead grew clearer. The woman said that what she was most grateful for was not only the settling of debts, but the feeling of being trusted, of being pulled back from the edge of despair. Thanks to Hoai Ca and Hung, she found the courage to stand firm and keep moving forward instead of giving up. When she spoke of finally being able to return to her own home, relief shone unmistakably in her eyes. That house was not merely shelter from sun and rain. It symbolized a return, a life no longer on the run. She no longer lived in fear, no longer felt suffocated when night fell. Though many worries still lay ahead, being able to return, to live in her rightful place, was already something profoundly precious. Hoai Ca listened quietly, without interrupting or rushing to respond. She understood that some stories only need to be told to bring release. Amid the lush green garden, in that peaceful air, burdens that once felt heavy gradually grew lighter. The simple meeting that day, unassuming and unshowy, left each person with a lingering warmth, like a quiet continuation of all they had been through together and a foundation for the paths still waiting ahead. Hoai Ca listened quietly to every word, without interrupting, without rushing to give her opinion. Only when the other person had finished speaking did she gently respond, her voice slow and composed. She offered her advice with the sincerity of someone who had endured many losses herself, hoping that from now on there would be no more overwhelming upheavals like before. She wished for things to settle, even just a little, so that Hung could worry less, fewer sleepless nights, fewer burdens weighing invisibly on shoulders long accustomed to endurance. For Hoai Ca, a life with calmer waters, even slightly so, was already something precious. She understood better than anyone the hardships Hung had gone through during this time. It was not only about money, but about responsibilities piling up day after day. He had borrowed from everywhere, lowered his head to ask for help one person at a time, all while caring for an ailing mother and struggling to keep his small family from slipping into instability. There were moments when everything seemed beyond his limits, yet he still clenched his teeth and carried on, without complaint, without giving up. Hoai Ca saw all of it. She rarely spoke about it, but she held it clearly in her heart. She said that for her, the most important things were not a spacious house or material abundance. Those things were nice to have, but their absence did not trouble her deeply. What she always placed above all else was integrity, the trust of those who had reached out to help her and her family in their darkest moments. She believed that as long as that trust remained intact, no matter how simple life might be, one could still live with head held high, without shame before one's own conscience or the kindness of others. The conversation flowed on and gradually shifted to the approach of Tet. The final days of the year always carried a special feeling, both anticipation and a quiet heaviness. An invitation to spend the holiday in a well-equipped, comfortable home was extended with heartfelt sincerity. It was not mere social courtesy, but a genuine wish to share warmth, to ease the emptiness that often lingers at the beginning of the new year. The speaker hoped Hoai Ca would not have to spend Tet alone, hoping that she and Tony could welcome a warmer, more complete holiday. Hoai Ca responded with only a gentle smile. It was not a cold refusal, but the softness of someone accustomed to making quiet choices. She said that her current life, though simple, was far better than before. Gone were the days of desperate scrambling, gone the feeling of being pushed into a dark corner with no escape. For her, the peace she now had was already a great gift. What she longed for most each spring was not lavish feasts or material comforts, but the feeling of having a true family, a place where people could sit together, share a meal, and exchange simple yet sincere moments. Her words naturally softened the atmosphere around them. No one spoke right away, only the sound of the wind stirring the leaves, as if it too were listening. After a moment of silence, Hoai Ca slowly confided the deep sorrow she had always kept hidden. It was the sadness of someone who did not know whether her biological parents were still alive, where they were, or how they were living. Her childhood memories were so faint that often only scattered fragments remained, never enough to form a complete image of a family. Whenever Tet arrived and she saw others reunited, a hard-to-name sense of loneliness would rise within her. It was not envy, but a quiet void that had existed for a very long time. She had searched, had hoped to trace some clue about her blood family. Yet every effort ended in futility, leaving behind exhaustion and unanswered questions. At times, She wondered whether continuing the search still held any meaning, or if it only reopened old wounds with each new disappointment. Even so, Hoai Ca said she continued to live on, as she had for many years. She told herself that if one day she could find her family again, it would be a blessing granted by fate. If not, she would not allow herself to collapse because of it. What she wished for most now was simply that Tony be healthy and safe, that those around her live in peace, and that she herself remains strong enough to keep moving forward. These confessions carried no bitterness or despair, but the quiet acceptance of someone who had learned to live with absence. In that still space, Hoai Ca's story flowed gently, continuing what had already passed, while also opening silent reflections on the paths still waiting ahead. As they were about to part, when it seemed that every story had already come to an end, the woman suddenly reached out and gently took Hoai Ca's hand. Her hand trembled slightly. A trace of hesitation crossed her eyes before giving way to quiet resolve, as if she had thought about this for a very long time before finally speaking. She confided a secret she had kept hidden for many years, one she had never dared to share with anyone. The money from earlier, aside from being used to settle the heavy debts, had also been quietly set aside for one purpose: to search for her biological son, who had been lost for a very long time. According to what little she had managed to find out, he was now living far away in a foreign land, distant and wrapped in uncertainty. Her voice lowered when she spoke the words, "my son," as if they carried both deep remorse and a fragile hope. For years, searching for him had been an unrelenting ache in her heart. But harsh circumstances, deaths and one crisis after another, had forced her to put that wish aside, enduring it in silence. Only when things began to ease did she finally dare to devote a portion of the money to that search, even knowing that the road ahead would be long and might never yield an answer. By revealing this, she did not seek advice or further help. She only wanted Hoai Ca to understand and to keep it confidential. She earnestly asked Hoai Ca not to tell Hum or Tiu San. It was not from a lack of trust, but from fear that they might be burdened by it, fear that complicated thoughts would weigh on hearts already under too much pressure. She wanted everything to stop here, at least until she herself could face the outcome, whether it brought hope or disappointment.
Hoài Ca clearly not dead.
She did not ask further questions, nor did she show much emotion. She understood that some feelings were meant to be kept like a private space that deserved respect. Before they realized it, evening began to fall. The last light of day stretched along the path, bathing everything in a pale golden hue, warm, yet faintly melancholic. The woman departed, carrying with her so many unspoken thoughts. Her figure slowly disappeared down the narrow road, leaving behind an unusually quiet yard. The space grew still, with only the gentle breeze and the familiar sounds of a late village afternoon. Hoai Ca watched for a moment, then turned back into the yard. She resumed her unfinished tasks, slowly arranging the flower pots she had set out in the sun. Each pot was adjusted with care, a habit ingrained over time. Looking closely, she noticed that every plant was growing strong. Lush green leaves, sturdy stems, no sign of withering. Some pots that once seemed unlikely to survive were now thriving, as if given the right conditions, anything could change. Standing in the familiar yard, Hoai Ca felt her heart grow calm. The chaos and losses that had passed through her life seemed to be set down, at least for this moment. She realized that life was much like the vegetable garden, like those flower pots. With soil that was good enough, faith that endured, and patience that lasted long enough, even things once buried under hardship or pain could sprout in their own way, quietly, without haste, but steadily and surely. She stood there and took a deep breath, sensing the familiar sense of earth and greenery. Thoughts intertwined within her, both worry and hope. Though many things ahead remained unclear, and though the newly revealed secret carried its own weight, she still believed that as long as she kept moving forward and held fast to her faith as she always had, life would not betray a sincere heart. And from that moment of stillness, a new chapter was quietly beginning, waiting for what would come next. Stay tuned for the next video to find out how the story unfolds.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình làm video tiếp nha mọi người. Mình làm tập tiếp theo. Ôi trời ơi, mình bị xịp trời. Cảm ơn tất cả mọi người đã theo dõi và ủng hộ cho kênh của mình nhé. Ôi trời ơi, nãy giờ mình quên mất một việc đấy. Tạm biệt mọi người nhé. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở video sau. Bye bye.